Good afternoon. Thank you for attending this evening's public hearing to discuss potential amendments to the Columbus City Code sections which govern vehicles for hire. Just a reminder, any person who takes any action to obstruct or interfere with the conduct of this evening's meeting may be charged with disturbing a lawful meeting pursuant to Columbus City Code 2317.12, and any person who enters the area of City Council chambers reserved for city officials or invited guests may be charged with criminal trespass pursuant to Columbus City Code 2311.21. Copies of this evening's agenda and information on proposed legislation are available at the entrance of City Council chambers. The Department of Public Safety License Section is responsible for overseeing the permitting of licensing of vehicles for hire to ensure the public receives fair and equal treatment. Today, we will be discussing potential changes to the Columbus City Code that will increase the efficiency and effectiveness of the licensing process. I'd like to introduce Support Services Administrator Kathy Collins to share an overview of the proposed changes. Administrator Collins, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Safety Chair Brown. About 12 months ago, I took on a new role within public safety that includes oversight of licensing for the department. It was quickly discovered that Chapter 5 of the City Code, which references the various licenses for which we are responsible, needed updating. The Vehicle for Hire section, on which we are seeking your feedback, is the first of several sections to address. Over the past decade, several updates have been made to parts of this code to attempt to keep up with various new modes of transportation, but these proposed changes today further modernize and streamline the code. These changes are intended to improve the licensing process for vehicles for hire operators and assure consumers in the industry that the industry is operating above board. The proposed changes will accomplish many goals. One, to reflect the changes that have and continue to occur in the industry. Two, it will make the provisions consistent with current and future proposed language in Chapter 5. 3, they will increase the efficiency of the license application process for the applicant and help workflow within the division. 4, they will increase the efficiency of promulgating needed rules. And 5, lastly, it allows us to clean up the language and realign the code. Some of the more noteworthy changes include taking out the fees consistent with the request of the administration and giving the director the discretion to set fees. Streamlining the appointment of the Vehicle for Hire board members by making them directors' appointments and defining the board's authority. Clarifying language in reference to license revocations. Removing any regulatory language in reference to transportation network companies as state law prevents any local oversight. Vehicle for Hire drivers will be allowed to submit renewal applications up to 60 days prior to the expiration of their license as opposed to the current 30. And just for year 2020, drivers can select the month their renewal will be due to start a staggered expiration system instead of the current procedure where they all expire in 1 month. This will be a benefit of convenience to the license applicant and assist with the workflow in the division. The license fee will be based upon the duration of the license. This will allow for a future year-round renewal system. Lastly, the Vehicle for Hire licenses will expire on the last day of the month instead of reflecting the day they were issued as an expiration date. Members and spectators at the last 2 Vehicle for Hire board meetings have been advised of the concept of these changes and have not voiced any objection. And I want to emphasize that none of these changes affects the current language dealing with the actual vehicles in the inspection process. I want to thank Safety Chair Brown and his staff for their diligent and thoughtful work on these changes. With me, I have Assistant City Attorney Alyssa Wilson and License Officer Benjamin Lee. They will assist in any questions, and thank you for your time, and we'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Well, just a few questions. Specifically, does this impact Uber and Lyft, or will it have an impact on Uber and Lyft?
Safety Chair Brown, no, we have no regulatory authority at all over Ubers and Lyft's transportation network systems. State code changed that, I think, back in 2015, 2016.
This is for the viewing public so they understand that it
Yes.
won't have an impact. Will these changes impact the inspection process for vehicles for hire?
It will have nothing to do with the vehicle inspection process at all. This is aimed at the licensing system for the operators and not for the inspection and licensing of the actual vehicles.
And you made reference to the change of the dates of when someone gets inspection. Is that going to require more additional staff for you, or is that the existing staff sufficient to be able to deal with the volume of requests?
The operator doesn't go with the inspection. The inspection's a different time of year than the actual operator license renewal. So it's not going to change anything to do with the actual inspection.
And so
Process.
there isn't going to be additional need for additional staffing?
Not at this point.
Okay. Does that mean there's a possibility in the future?
I suppose if we had an explosion of vehicle
Okay.
for hires, it could.
But we'll have to wait and see then. Okay.
Never give up that right, sir.
Exactly. Are the standards for age and condition and cleanliness addressed by this code?
Nothing deals with the actual vehicle and the code changes that we have. Current language will still stand as it is.
And do you know what that is? Do you have it available
I'm
to you?
going to let License
Mr.
Officer
Lee?
Lee answer that.
Certainly.
Yes, sir. Currently, for taxi cabs, in order for a vehicle to be placed in the service as a taxi cab, it can be no older than 6 years old and have no more than 200,000 miles on it. Once it is in service, we cut it off at 10 years. So once it's more than 10 years old, it cannot be renewed as a taxi cab. The other big category we have is livery vehicles. Those to be put into service can be no more than also 6 years. But once they're in service, we will not renew them once they exceed 8 years old.
Approximately, what are the numbers right now with regards to vehicles for hire that we have in the city of Columbus? Do you have that knowledge, Mr. Lee?
Roughly, we have about 300 taxi cabs and about 100 livery vehicles. Those are the major categories. Now we have microtransit vehicles, which currently I don't think we have any of. And we have about 10, they call them quadricycles. Those are the ones where people are drinking and biking around the short north.
Oh, yeah. You know how much I love those. When you're a driver for a cab, we do things a little bit differently, obviously, than what the state's requirements are with regards to the other, for Uber and Lyft. There's a background checks done on cab drivers, are there not?
Yes, sir. We do a BCI background check, and we look at their driver abstract, which is their driving record. There is a set number of points that they cannot exceed. So for their 3-year record, they can have no more than 8 points on their driving record. And a letter of good standing. And that's something from the city's income tax division to ensure that they are not delinquent on their income tax.
And so this isn't going to have any kind of a negative impact on the current standards with regards to vehicles and all that, as I understand it, correct?
That is correct.
So as we were talking about just a little bit more about the professional driver's license required for a taxi cab driver, is there anything else you wish to elaborate on? Not that I have anything against individuals who are Uber and Lyft drivers, just that I know that cab drivers are held to a different standard.
That seems to be the case. We don't exactly know what the standards are for the Uber and Lyft, the transportation network company, what their standards are, what they look for. Unfortunately, we are out of the loop on that. During the time that we were licensing them, we held them to the same standards as our taxi drivers. And ever since we are unable to regulate them, we don't publicly know what the requirements are.
And the reason why I bring it up is I've had a bit of an experience with some drivers, and it was not pleasant, where I know with cab drivers, they can be held accountable and can be held responsible for their conduct. A relative of mine had a problem with her property being left in an Uber vehicle and had difficulty getting it back. We were able to secure it where that would not have been the case with a professional taxi cabs. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And, and maybe Kathy, you can tell me, are we still doing the ambassador program for, with the cabs for the city of Columbus? Or Lee, you can tell me if you, sure.
Okay, so part of the requirements when we re-implemented the professional taxi driver licenses, in order to make it more of a broad, well-rounded, beneficial role, Experience Columbus does offer what's called a CTA, Certified Tourism Ambassador Program. It's a nationwide thing. Experience Columbus does it locally. So we built that into our professional driver requirement, and it's basically something where the applicants would take a class. It teaches them different things about the city, the history, and other things that they'd want to share with other people, especially visitors who are not familiar with Columbus. So basically makes them an ambassador for the city and someone who can just share all the benefits and the beauty of the city.
And so that's part of the whole program for the taxi cab drivers, right?
For professional cab drivers, we require
Professional
that.
cab drivers.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Will the fee structure change any part of this amendment? We're not going to change the fee structure, are we not, Kathy?
The fees will remain the same at this point. That's going to be our recommendation to the director, is not to change that.
And one of the questions that has been brought up to me is like, how often are the fees changed? It's been a long, long time, if I'm not mistaken. Mr. Lee, maybe you can answer that. But
I've been with the city for a little over 6 years. I believe about 4 or 5 years ago, so roughly around 2014 or 2015, the fees for the driver license, meaning the taxi or livery driver licenses, those I believe went up, and our application fees had gone up about 2 years ago. But those are the only ones since I've been around. So I believe you're correct that they don't. It's been quite a while since any of the other fees have changed.
and does that require council approval, or, but it's being proposed now is this will be in the director's office, correct?
As it stands now, with the new language, it would be at the discretion of the director, but we are open to any suggestions to changing that. To
No,
require
I
some
have,
type, either some type of oversight, or at least review by council.
it would seem to me that maybe every 5 years, there ought to be some form of review by city council in the sense of if there are or not any changes to the fees. Just leaving it indiscriminate, I think I think may cause potential issues later on down the road. There's no problem with the director changing the fees, but I think it ought to be subject to review on the part of city council.
Understood, and we'll take that under consideration, sir.
Thank you. There being no other additional questions, I think it's also important to acknowledge that the Chief Counsel is present. Ms. Baker Morris, thank you for your attendance. It is appreciated. Are there any speakers? At this time, we'll take public comment, but there were no speaker slips that were filled out. So that being the case, I would like to present to the community, if members of the community have any further questions or concerns, that they should feel free to contact my office at 614-645-4605 or the license section at 614-645-8366. In closing then, the vehicle for hire industry has seen a sizable change over the past decade, and I commend Administrator Collins and her staff for their thoughtful recommendations. It's important for the City of Columbus to always be mindful of how we can improve. I believe the recommended change will serve our residents and the business owners that operate vehicles for hire in our city. Also, I'd like to thank Administrator Collins, Ms. Wilson, Mr. Lee, and Ms. Baker Morris for their work on these presentations for this evening. I would also like to recognize Denise Friend Foster from my office and Mr. Grant Ames in preparing this evening's hearings. Following this hearing, my office will solicit public input on the proposed changes to the Columbus City Code, and based on that feedback, an ordinance will be drafted within the proposed changes, and we'll move from there. This concludes tonight's Public Safety Committee hearing. Thank you all for attending.